It is WoW podcast time. The Suboptimal boys are back. I'm joined by Hakkd and TheCheat, and we are here to discuss Warriors. Cheat, how are ya? Hakkd, how are ya?
Oh, not too bad.
Doing pretty good, dude.
Good, good. So for those who have been watching, Hakkd is my normal co-host. Cheat is our special guest, warrior extraordinaire. I will let him give a quick intro because he does not want to be known as a one-trick. Cheat.
Well, I've been playing WoW since like 2006, May 2006 to be precise, right after I graduated from high school. And unfortunately, I'm probably a one-trick. I've played warrior as a main for pretty much that entire span. I've switched mains twice, once in Burning Crusade, once in Pandaria, but I always switched back.
Yep.
Just the warrior playstyle is something that really, you know, it keeps me engaged, keeps me going. Mobility
Just makes sense, you know.
Exactly.
To be fair, this motherfucker's good at it.
Yeah, it does help
We're
when you're
talking about a monster here. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to play something else when you're just so good at.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely been a trip for sure.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's kind of how I am with Druid. No matter what I do, no matter what I play, I always kind of find my way, at least some point in an expansion, like back to Druid. For whatever reason, I just like being a cat and I like being a tree, I guess.
Everybody wants to be a cat.
So this is a warrior podcast for this episode. Before we get into that and let Cheat deep dive us down the warrior rabbit hole, beta came out today for Dragonflight, which is really cool. With that came a fuckload of class changes, tree changes. So we're not going to get into all those. Depending on how significant the changes are, and as we get closer to finalized trees, we may go back and do another evoker, another shaman episode, another warrior episode, and then maybe do like a quick overview of all the rest, or get some other people to guest for their like main classes. But the one thing that I did want to bring up, because it goes back to something that Hakkd had brought up when we did our shaman show. So Priest, after getting zero feedback for weeks, got a massive revamp to their class tree and to all the spec trees. From my initial looks, very good in general, what they're getting done. But the interesting thing that they brought back to Shadow, if you're on the Wowhead tree and you hold shift, this is a handy tool if anybody didn't know. You can hold shift and see the names of the abilities. It's really awesome. So this left talent here right before the break point of 8 points is a talent called Shadow Orbs. Now it's not yet implemented, so we don't know how it's going to function. But if anybody played Shadow basically pre-Legion, I think in MOP was the last time Shadow Orbs were the resource.
I think WAD.
WAD? Okay. So it's just a builder spender, a lot like how shards work with Warlock. You basically spent Mind Blast to gain Shadow Orbs, and then you spent them on Devouring Plague. It's a little more complex than that. But what I find interesting about this is an old resource generator where Shaman also had pre-Maelstrom stacks. They actually just had like a resource bar, a Maelstrom bar, before like Enhanced just used the 10 stack Maelstrom system. So now, depending on how it works, we don't know yet. How I assume it's going to work is not going to be a secondary play style where you can choose to replace Insanity with Shadow Orbs. I don't think that's what they're going to do. What I think this is going to be is a secondary resource where you spend Shadow Orbs on abilities to enhance them. So Mind Blast will cleave or do a small AoE if you spend a Shadow Orb when you Mind Blast, or Devouring Plague will consume the other dots and basically amp up your Devouring Plague. That is how I think this is going to work. I
feel like that's very GCD heavy. Like, I think if it does work like that, that just doesn't work.
I don't think you're gonna have to
I think
push
that's a
Shadow
bad-
Orb. It's not. It's gonna be passive.
But then, like, okay, I'm on single target and I want to Mind Blast anyway, but I don't want to use a Shadow Orb on that, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Like, if it is a resource, like, I need to know, like, I need to have agency over when I use my resource.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how. Obviously, we don't know how it's gonna build and how it's gonna spend.
Right.
But with that said, I think it's a big opportunity to bring, to Hack's point from the Shadow or from the Shaman episode, multiple play styles, not just from a talent standpoint, but from a resource standpoint. If you don't want to play Maelstrom Stack Shaman and you want to go back to pooling resource bar Shaman like it was in WoD, you could do that. I think it's a huge opportunity to just expand the different play styles. Probably a balancing nightmare on, but I'm very
It's
interested.
definitely a balancing nightmare, but it's like, I feel like that's one thing. Like, so they're going a different way, which is making all the talent trees try to flow to where you have like maybe 5 choices at the end of the tree once you've taken everything that you need.
Yeah.
But I think there was an opportunity to go the other way, where, you know, just don't be so rigid with what connects to what, and kind of give you some freedom to go around.
Yeah.
And make the tree like huge. You can add so many points, and it's okay that you're missing out on things, because you might be missing out on things that are for a playstyle that you're not interacting with. But I think it's a missed opportunity to bring a lot of that back. Just how like rich the history behind some of these specs are, how many iterations they've had.
The other thing I think that's interesting here is it's in the top third of the tree, which makes it extremely easy to get, and it looks like it has 2 nodes directly off of it that will be enhancing it in some way. And if you don't take it to, and you want to take Damnation, the other way you'd have to path would be through utility instead of through what is probably a damage node in Shadow Orbs.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably going to be a core play style for Shadow. I just find that very interesting that something like that would be brought back. I don't know. If you have any other thoughts, or Cheat, you had anything that you wanted to add around this? I don't know how much Shadow Priest you've played or no.
I actually did play a lot of Shadow as just a throwaway alt in Kata, especially. And actually, Shadow Orbs had one of my favorite cosmetic glyphs in the game, which was Shadow Ravens, where you could change the appearance of the orbs into ravens, kind of like what Khadgar transforms into. But I totally agree with Hack. There has to be some type of agency behind whatever this buff is going to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a passive damage increase you have no control over, and therefore no thought process needs to go into it.
Right.
I also just think, like, I know some people like the old Shadow Orb, Shadow Priest, but like, this is the wrong playstyle to bring back, in my opinion. I like Mind Spike coming back, because I thought that was a lot of fun with the Shadow Orbs, but not bringing back rotational Void Form is just, you fail.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't want to spend too
rotational
much
Void
time
Form
on.
has to come back, or Shadow Priest just is bad. Like,
Yeah. We could spend a whole episode obviously doing Shadow Priest, but I thought I just wanted to bring this up, and like, I think they should do this for other classes. This is more my point, is I would love to see multi versions of builder spender or resource generation start coming back for some of the other classes that had those options, just to give them more choice in these trees. So
I will bring up real quick, I still like, kudos to Blizzard for some of the, especially the best trees, where they do give you a choice to change damage profile.
Yeah.
In a lot of these trees, which is awesome, because like, we're gonna get into warrior soon, but arms specifically, just from looking through the build, has a couple just like very clear options to completely change damage profile. You know, like in AoE, for instance, you've got 3 different kind of avenues you can go down. You know, do you want, you know, this kind of AoE profile or this kind of AoE profile, or do you want to like hard focus into just cleave? You know?
Right.
I think that they're doing a good job there. So
Yeah, and there's
not bashing too hard on not having enough choice, because there's plenty of choice. I just think
yeah, and
playstyle should be one of them.
to be fair to Shadow, the rest of the tree actually looks like a fucking banger, and the class tree looks really good now when I was looking through Priest. So it's just more intrigue than like anger around Shadow Orbs being added back as a node.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is going to be the warrior class discussion. I started putting trees together yesterday in preparation for this, and then they go and drop the beta and completely change everything. So with that said, we'll be winging it a little bit. So Cheat, I selected Prot to start. I don't know if you wanted to start there with the class tree or just kind of talk about the general class tree, and then we can do the spec trees.
Yeah, no, I actually think that's a good idea. A little bit of history for me on Warrior. I actually was a tank for the vast majority of my WoW career. I didn't start maining or at least trying to master DPS until Legion. And that was in part because of raid groups where we didn't have good enough DPS, and so I felt like I needed to fill the slack. You know how that is.
Yep.
One thing I'd like to point out before we really dive in is that they're sort of starting to experiment a bit with nodes that are different between the trees. So if you go down and look at one-handed specialization on Prot right now, which is right there, that node changes depending on which spec you're looking at.
Yep. Yeah.
So
which is good. I
yes.
think that's awesome.
Oh, that's
it was really dumb because it put Fury in the weird position of wanting to pick up dual wield spec and two-handed spec.
Right.
Just make them all mutually exclusive.
And it also just like, imagine for Prot, like if there is a two-handed weapon spec, it's like that's literally a dead point. So it can't path to anything.
Right.
It needs to be completely by itself.
Well, and
it's like, but then what's the point of it being there?
Wasn't the last iteration of the class tree like in between where Spear and Thunderous Roar is now was the dual wield bonus, and then in between where Avatar and Shockwave was the two-hander bonus. So you needed to get both for Fury.
Yep, and you couldn't get both points and still pick up two powerful.
Right. So really just yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. So it seems like that's a positive change then.
Yep.
Okay.
So for class tree, as far as protection goes, I actually think so much of this is very straightforward because they're all tools that Prot is already going to want to use, like Berserker Rage, Intervene, Rallying Cry, Heroic Leap, Bounding Stride for the cooldown reduction. The way the top 8 section works out across all the specs actually feels good to me in that light, and you still have a bit of utility available with the leech you just looked at, as well as if they do something more interesting with the stances, you could have that as an alternative for a tank.
So I also do want to point out, just like in your note, in our show notes, you kind of have like your lock-in. Berserker Rage, I don't think is a lock-in, right?
Agreed.
That
there
can
are definitely
be
situations
like
where you don't need it.
Yeah, that being like you being able to save a point and dropping it, like that's the kind of shit we're looking for. And I think there's a couple pain points in the tree still where there are things that are just in the way. It's like, man, I could drop this for like situational things, but it's like it doesn't work out to where I can realistically drop it because I'm just gonna pick up the point anyway.
Right, so, and
but I think
in the case
it's a lot better now.
And in the case of something like Piercing Howl, for example, you're now pigeonholed into taking Berserker Rage, even if you're not in a scenario where as the tank you would ever get sapped or feared.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I'm getting at too. Like, it just needs more connections, or I'm still on the fence about the connections period.
They actually added some connections in this build, but they're all in the 8+ sections. They didn't do anything with the top.
So as a Prot warrior, like to get this leech, you have to take Berserker stance, which you don't want, right? Like to get the leech, because if you were gonna to stance, you would want battle stance at when you're off tanking, not berserker, like just for general throughput. So like that feels also terrible to have to spend 2 points to get your leech.
I will say the leech sees far more use in Mythic Plus than it would in a raid environment.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
the off tanking scenario, to me, that doesn't really exist because you're not going to be going after the leech anyways. So you're not having to waste those 2 points.
Yeah, because
also
then
think
you would
that
just
this
take
is
battle stance.
The
Correct.
most egregious for prot specifically, just because it's like you have so many more mandatory points in the top of the tree as prot than you do as arms and fury. Like
Agreed.
arms can very easily go grab this leech even though
Mm.
they're not going to use berserker stance, and it's like they're not missing out on anything to do that, which is fantastic, right? And it just, I think there's a couple workarounds that could happen for prot, and I think for fury too. I think fury is better, but prot is the worst by far.
Do you think they're going to rework berserker stance to be something somewhat relevant, or like is it just a numbers tuning thing where they just up the auto attack damage by X% that it would become relevant and worth taking? Because like I know for fury you get this point for free, but you just don't want it. Like you just immediately grab battle stance and then you're moving into the rest of your tree. Like it feels bad.
I don't know what they could do to it though, and they've said that they still want to try and iterate on stances to be something meaningful while not being super hard required like what they were from vanilla through mop.
Right.
But I don't know where that goes. I mean, it's obviously their job to make that determination, but I don't have the ideas.
Right. I just
funny too for fury, it just becomes a thing like even if you did want to use berserker stance, you're still taking battle stance anyway just to like fill out points and get what you want before like the second row unlocks anyway.
Right, because you're gonna want battle stance so you can grab rallying cry and stuff anyway.
Yeah.
It's just like if you're playing arms, you just like you don't have to spend the extra point if you don't want to. You know, because you
Which
can.
I mean, it is worth noting arms is gonna grab berserker stance regardless. But
Yeah. Okay. So we've got our just generic 8 points. It doesn't really matter what we grab here just to get into the next row. So we're moving down now. Or were there any other points up here that you wanted to talk about as interesting?
I actually do want to call out for prot that the entire the middle right side that starts with Furious Blows right above 8 point, there's almost nothing in there that prot wants to take, and so it's completely okay that we don't have to go down that path at all, in my opinion.
Okay.
Maybe there's a niche in the future where like Titanic Throw is worth going after because it's we add pickup for a raid encounter maybe, but besides that there's no reason to really touch that, and you can get to Seismic Reverberations with that choice node that has Stormbolt.
Right. Right. Yeah,
I'm kind of wondering if Revenge is even the play, or if it's like your Thunderclap Rend focused. So I wonder if you even go to the right at all anyway.
Well, I don't even like this new talent they've made, Barbaric Training, because it makes Revenge cost more in order to get that damage buff.
Where's that at?
The way prot has sort of feeling great
choice
APM
node far
heavy
right.
right now. Like the very APM heavy style of prot right now feels really good, and you can't do that if you increase the rage cost of Revenge.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, do you still get the free Revenge proc?
Only on parries, and I don't even think it's guaranteed. It's a
Okay,
chance
like,
on
is
parry
that-
to...
Man, imagine if
that
Die by
in
the Sword
here,
was
or
still
is
in the
it-
class tree.
Is it passive? Is that like a passive that prot has, or is it in here somewhere with the?
It should be a passive. I'd have to check on beta, but I would assume it's still in the game.
Because I wonder, even if you take Barbaric Training and you kind of go back to the, like,
Look at
the
Revenge
OG
in
play
the
style.
spec tree, Rain, and it's actually just on the ability itself. It's
Swinging a wide
your
arc.
successful dodges and parries have a chance to make it cost no rage.
okay, so I wonder if that works with Barbaric Training to where it's like, okay, well, it's free, but it still does 40% more damage. So it goes back to the
Right.
old, like, you don't press Revenge unless it's procced anyway, and then you're basically just slamming 40% extra damage on it.
I don't know
I
if
can
you
see
would.
that working.
I don't know if you would really ever get here though, because you'd have to take Like you'd have to cut through like 1, 2, 3, a fourth point just to get to it. You know, like it'd
I mean,
be
it depends.
depends on how tuning is, but
Well, I think there's an opportunity to go for like a thunderous roar plus thunderous words build with like the render clap as cheat
yeah. Well,
cheat coined it.
and to be
I think
fair,
there's an opportunity to go like path down the right and just take like mega bleed consistent AoE damage.
this would be a
Right,
Mythic Plus
because-
situation. It
Exactly.
most yeah.
And if you're gonna path down that student direction, you probably want the additional leech from the Berserker stance side
Right.
of the node anyways. So
Right.
Yeah, this is like the Mythic Plus prot build over here on the right. Okay.
or at least a variation of it, because there's a
But also,
lot available on the left side
To
too.
that point, Rain, I think that's okay that you're giving up something like you're not able to path over here if you're building specifically for like a single target raid boss and you're going heavy into defense.
Oh, so
Like,
I've heard
I
this.
think there is choice there.
I've heard this brought up a bunch from like other creators who have done something similar to this about, you know, oh, it feels bad. I can't get this. I can't get this. Like, I don't want to get the whole tree, right? Because then
Right.
why even have talent
What's
trees,
the point?
Mhm.
right? Just give me everything then, and just like I'll just play. Like if I don't have to make decisions.
I think Prot is very like, so they're very thin in the top. They kind of get whatever they want in the middle, and then they're kind of thin at the bottom. But even after you get everything that you would like need for any specific build that you're trying to play, you still have anywhere between like 3 to 5 points, like to just pick and choose and tailor your build how you want. And I think that's where it lands perfectly. I think Prot is in a decent spot with that.
Yeah. All right, take me down the rest here, cheat.
Yeah, so there's at least one required node called Armored to the Teeth.
Yep.
Right above where the 20 threshold is.
Yep.
And that requires a little bit of effort to get to. But you've got good choices to get to it between cooldown of your interrupt reduction or chance to refund rage on revenge or heroic leap cooldown reduction, which is one of my personal favorite effects. So I don't really see that as much of a problem.
Yeah.
This is sort of the area where they started to open up more paths to be able to get to some of these. Some of the straight lines here weren't present before this build.
Mm-hmm. Is this placeholder updated on beta, or is it still just Bounding Stride right now?
What was there before? They moved something out of that.
I don't remember what it was prior to. Obviously, we're going to get something else, probably heroic leap related, in here.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
wonder
it's
if maybe double leap. The leaper
like
Lego.
Barbarian.
Yeah.
Like the Fury talent. Yeah, that would actually be a good.
That'd be
I think
nice.
That would be really good.
I do.
You either have heroic leap more often and then have a sprint attached to it, or you get double, triple, whatever the.
Right.
I do think that it's interesting they moved Frothing Berserker up the tree and took it off the choice node, and now it's just a 1 point. You just grab it and like definitely feels mandatory to get to Armored to the Teeth. Like I don't think there's really any. I think every warrior, no matter what the situation, you're going to be coming down this way just to get these 2 nodes, just because they're so strong.
Why do you need to take Frothing though? Because like,
Uh,
unless you're specifically like playing a cleave build, which you're not necessarily doing if you're like, you don't have to in every iteration of builds, right? So it's like,
Absolutely. Like Frothing
has
has no use on a raid boss, for example.
Yeah, like you could.
well,
totally
for Prot
just slam
specifically, I guess that's
concussive
true.
blows.
Yeah.
You could just slam concussive blows from heroic leap to make it down to Armored to the Teeth, and you could just skip that entire left side. In the middle, at least,
Right,
and still make it down to like Avatar.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's a great choice. I think like if you are trying to slam for more damage and you're like, that's great.
Tell me about Blood and Thunder.
So the vaunted render clap build, which I believe, did they remove that in BFA or was it Legion? I thought WAD was the last time we saw it. Trying to remember.
It's been a minute.
I really hate this build for the primary reason that having to rend on pull when you're going into an AoE pack and Mythic Plus feels like an awful GCD because you can't immediately try to get snap threat. You have to tell your DPS to give you an extra GCD.
So I've actually seen a take on this where it's like you don't set that up immediately. You go in, you thunderclap pre-rend. Like you don't go in rend thunderclap. You go in thunderclap, spread a rend or two, and then thunderclap it. Like on the next go around, especially on like an avatar pool with unstoppable force. Like
I could
think
actually see
I
that.
think in an era where unstoppable force exists, I think maybe it plays fun, right?
Yeah, maybe, and I could see that working as well, even with like a mix of a thunderous roar with a ravager build, where you have these
Right.
different cooldowns to use on a pull to make up for not being able to spread immediately.
Yeah, like one pull you have avatar, so you're gonna go in thunderclap, pop avatar, get the cooldown back while you're spreading the rends to do that. Or it's like, okay, well I don't have avatar in this pull, but I have ravager. Slap the ravager down to start my rend and thunderclap. That
Right.
way you have multiple options, and
Yep. Really, the main thing I hate about that though is like it feels like another deep wounds. I'm pretty sure Prot's still gonna have deep wounds, so it's really just the bleed focus builds never screamed to me as like awesome, even if they are effective.
I was about to say
So
that's tuning dependent, right? Because
yep,
like, you know, there's things in the tree I believe where you're getting rage from bleed effects and stuff too. So like,
yep,
it might just be a really fast APM style where like maybe you can slam some extra rage on revenge to get more damage out of it because you're just
right.
getting so much rage from like all these bleeds in a Mythic Plus pool or something.
Right.
So it's really just tuning dependent, but I think it opens the opportunity for a lot of like just hey, we're trying it, right? Like you could play every single dungeon differently until you find something that's just like, dude, this is fun as fuck.
So right now we like have gotten a lot of the stuff that we want. We are only at 15 points, so we have 5 more before we can even move down. And I think this was to Hack's point, was you feel really restricted up top and then the middle really opens up and then you kind of feel restricted at the bottom again because you just don't have enough points to go around.
Yeah, because
So
you have to remember you can go back up now
right,
if you want,
right.
right?
So you can get a lot of the different utility that you want to get, which I think is good, right? You can grab your berserker and your leech. You could grab intimidating shout if you needed it.
There is one damage talent which I would see is almost required only because Prot's playstyle is built around resetting shield slam and it's crushing force on the 8-point tier. That's 10% additional damage to shield slam, which you're going to be putting out a lot when it resets because it's still your best rage gain.
Yeah, and that's huge.
Did I miss it?
You had it. It's blowhorn reflexes.
On the left. Yeah. Do you have the option to just slam 1 point in this though? Like, is that something that you could leverage giving up if like, oh, I'm gonna drop a point out of crushing force, especially because it's not connected to anything that like you would lose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's other utility needed, that's definitely
I
not
think
like
that's
a hardcore, but it's
this
really good.
is a 2-point done right, and it kind of just plays it.
Yeah.
This is how it should work, right? Like you should be able to just minus a point out of a 2-point node to like, well, I fucking need piercing howl or berserker rage or the fuck, I
Right.
need the move speed, right? Like whatever. You need something, you can slam a point out of a 2-point node, and I think that that should just always exist.
Well, even in this, with taking the 2, we've still gotten like a lot of the good shit with some opportunity to flex points here and there if we wanted to. So now let's now talk about the bottom 20 here.
So, in my opinion, there's the 2-pointers present a lot of interesting choice, but also problems because the armor one is virtually required for every scenario. I cannot envision a scenario besides like a magic only boss like Medivh and Upper Kara where this talent is not taken.
Not only is it
you just get
required for you to
strength.
get that, well, not only is it required for you to get that armor, but like
It's the
even if
only
it
connection
wasn't,
to Avatar.
I was about to say even if it wasn't, you need avatar, so you're taking
Yes.
it regardless. Yeah.
I can't envision a scenario where you're gonna just skip Avatar, even if you're not taking either of its capstones. Avatar
Right.
is still a good
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And then the next 2-pointer, endurance training, is great for buffer, but also I don't like it. Mostly because it's the only way to get to Shockwave. Like, I don't always need the extra stamina in M plus if I'm going to be one of the major healing focuses, but I need Shockwave for the crowd control.
Well, you know what's
Right.
funny is, regardless, like avoidance is so fucking good. You're taking 4% avoidance in every situation. There's so many, like, even raid bosses, right? Like, there are so many things that are tagged as AoE. So like
That's new to
avoidance.
this build because that node just used to be stamina.
Oh, did it? Well, yeah, it's got
Yes,
the
so
4% avoidance attached
probably
to it
the
now.
only thing that makes me feel better about that is that
Yeah.
they put something else on this.
I do also think it's weird that it's a 2-point that only increases the avoidance right now. Like,
So they've started to do this with other talents too, where the first effect doesn't change, but the second one changes, and that kind of bothers me.
like just make it a
Yeah.
1-point and give me the 10 and 4.
Or I'm just gonna keep kicking the dead horse, right? Like, make 2 points, not mandatory.
Yeah.
Make 2-pointers. That's awesome. Put a fuck ton of them in the tree. That's okay, but require 1 point to unlock below it. Like,
If they're like, if they have
dude,
a hard on
fucking
for
do
these
it.
2
And
points,
that's
only
great because if
giving
you have an extra point, boom, 2% more avoidance. I love that choice. That's awesome. Like, let me do that, but don't make it required to get to Shockwave. Like,
yeah, and
massive
honestly,
prot utility. Like,
if they have a hard on for keeping this like weird split thing where one stat increases and not the other, the messaging needs to be there in the tooltip.
Yeah.
Because on
Oh,
beta
yeah.
right now, you don't know which one changes and which one doesn't without actually watching it happen.
Right. You have to actually click it to see.
They need to highlight it like the conduit effects do, basically. I mean,
Yeah. Like, oh, it's highlighted blue. This is what's going to change. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think I don't like that at all. Like, I think you just make this a 1-point node and just give you the 10 and 4 and just be done with it.
or
Yep.
make it a 1-point node, just give you the 10 and 2.
Yeah.
I mean, 10%
Yeah.
stam you're gonna want for a 1-point anyway,
Right.
especially since it's connected to Shockwave. So then you're just getting, I mean, 10% stam, 2% avoidance. That's still really good. It's
All right. And then
hell. I would call you an idiot for not taking that as a 1-point to get, especially to get to Shockwave. Right? That's so good.
are you
But, yeah.
For
doing
Mythic Plus, I think the bottom of the tree here has a lot of variation possible because you could skip Bitter Immunity as an example. I don't like the cooldown on this ability, otherwise I think it would be a better pick. And you could take Avatar, Shockwave, and Spear of Bastion and still have a point left over to pick one of their capstones if you wanted to. That brings a lot of group control for the higher keys. And there's a lot of great capstone options for all three of those. The Spear duration increase from Elysian Might is massive. You could still take Unstoppable Force for Avatar if you want to, or Shockwave has some interesting effects that were added.
see that?
Yeah.
I especially like the addition of Sonic Boom if you really just want to put some damage into Shockwave because it always feels really crappy before. Like that's an interesting one to take if you really need to pump numbers.
Yeah.
I also think that Bitter Immunity is like, it's in a good spot for what it is too, right? Like, it's completely out of the way. You don't have to take it, and it's
Yeah.
a super situational thing. Like,
Like
if
it would
this
be
boss
it would
or
be great for a
dungeon-
necrotic week in M plus.
Well-
It's
Exactly.
basically a file, right?
yeah,
So-
you're gonna take it there, but like, if the dungeon isn't heavy on any of these, or like you don't feel the need to have it, you don't take it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think just having another, like, if you play Dwarf Warrior, you can take this. You have Dwarf removal, and now you have File back. Like, that makes, like, especially like you said on necrotic weeks, like, it almost makes Warrior tank, if you play that race combo, like, one of the best necrotic tanks for just every 3 minutes you get a removal on top of your Dwarf racial. You just alternate them.
Or when Die by the Sword was in the true.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could have Die by the Sword. You were just the best necrotic anything
Yeah.
bleed tank ever.
Yep.
Already. Cheat, I'm curious. So I built this a couple times and it felt like there is zero opportunity to ever take Thunderous Roar and Thunderous Words, which is
So it's
really
interesting you just
shitty.
pointed this out because I'm looking at this. I think it's possible, and in fact, if a bleed focus build becomes a thing, it's going to be required precisely because of the 20% bleed boost they added to Thunderous Words.
That's what I'm getting at.
You
But I
can
feel
get
like
to
it's
it by
so
dropping
hard.
Spear of Bastion and Cruel Strikes. You can get to it with those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're not really
And
losing anything else.
You
'Cause do
still keep
get
Avatar.
Shockwave?
You still
Yeah,
keep
you need
Shockwave.
Avatar. You need
You
Avatar.
need Avatar. You
and
don't need Shockwave, so you could pick up Avatar as Capstone and drop Shockwave here as
So-
well if you wanted to.
So
Okay.
built like this without taking 10% leech, if you didn't want 10% leech, you still have 1 point like this. So you have the Thunderous Roar, Thunderous Words, you keep Shockwave, you keep Avatar, and then you can pick one of their capstones as well.
Well,
which is
don't even
Unstoppable
forget,
Force.
you did take leech up top, which is fine. But in the way I'm doing it, I actually skipped that and took the leech from one-handed spec instead.
Okay, so either
Made my way
way,
down the tree. Yep.
yeah. So you
Okay.
could,
Still have some leech, just not all of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's higher value anyway, right?
right, because you get the 5% damage.
10% leech, but if you're getting the 5%, you're gonna get it from one-handed.
Well, and theoretically, you get another point back too, because then you don't have to take Berserker Stance. So it actually is mega value just grabbing it here. So, well, so it looks like Prot is in a good spot. It feels, now that we've talked about it, it doesn't feel as inflexible at the bottom as I maybe thought that it was.
Not as much. I think I was not thinking of taking out of like Berserker Stance before, because I was just, when I was playing with it, it's like, okay, well, Unstoppable Force, the Avatar capstone is a must.
Yeah.
Because if you're playing the bleed build, you need Unstoppable Force. It's like Thunderous Roar with the Thunderous Words. Now that I'm seeing that, I might play some Proud Warrior. That sounds so
Yeah.
fun, dude.
Yeah,
That
there's
sounds like a
definitely
lot of fun.
some good variation, and honestly, I didn't even know that you would be able to take Unstoppable Force and Thunderous Words in the same build until we just experimented here. So
Right. Well, oh my God, cheat. Think about it now, though. So, what we were just talking about, every single pull, you could be like, okay, I have Avatar on this pull, so I'm gonna go in Thunderclap, Rend, and just Thunderclap spam and spread that shit out. But on the next pull, I'm gonna have, Thunderous Roar, so I'm gonna go and use that for Snap Threat, and then get my Rend spread with Thunderclap. And then on the next pull, I have Ravager for my Snap Threat
Right.
to let me spread my bleeds around. Like,
I do think,
man, I think that could be a really cool, just always on kind of build.
there is an
Good segue
opportunity.
to the Spectre too.
There is an opportunity too to like, you're not going to want Shockwave on every boss fight either if you're talking about a raid setting. So like you could get
on
a
raid
point.
setting, you're almost never
taking it. Yeah.
That's
So you
fantastic,
get another point back from that in raid that you can use for any other utility you may need. If there's like a fight with a shield and you need Shattering Throw or something, you can come, or not Shattering. Is it Wrecking Throw?
I love this choice node, by the way. I'm just gonna harp on it while we're here. Giving a PvE version of Shattering Throw for the extra damage to absorb shields, so good.
Yeah.
It's instant cast.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So like, yeah, I got a shield fight in raid. Okay, I don't need Shockwave. I know that. Like, I can still just take my 1 point in endurance if I don't want to take 2. All right, well now I've got like a bunch of options here. All right. So you want to do the spec tree, or do you want to just talk about any minor changes for Arms and Fury and the class tree?
We can talk about Spectre. There are a few interesting things in it as well.
Okay. Let's do Prot real quick then.
Real quick, I do want to point out one thing that I just thought of too is Prot is in the perfect situation that I didn't even think about. You could slam Spear Bastion, not for the damage, just for the control.
Mhm.
So I think that's actually a really good choice between Shockwave and Spear Bastion. So I think that makes it a lot easier too, because you don't need either of the capstones for that. If you're just taking it for the control.
Right.
So I think Prot in the class tree side looks a lot better than I thought at first. So
yeah,
it's looking good.
if you wanted to use it for control on stuff like say Celia's ads in Gambit, then not taking Elysian Might does add a bit more of a skill component because you don't get the duration increase on the pull.
Right.
But besides that, you're absolutely right.
All right.
So Prot tree is interesting because the top section has so much required shit until you get to the choice branches.
You pretty much get to take it all though, like for free.
Yeah, like
stressing, right?
Yeah, like brace for impact. The main thing though is there are some scenarios where, for example, you're not going to take unnerving focus all the time. So brace for impact is the clear choice on that node.
I feel like, do you ever want unnerving focus? Like, why do you?
It's
I
actually
don't
one
know
of the
that.
endurance conduits we use right now because
I
last
don't know
stand is
that
still a
it's
really good CD.
necessary though. Right, but like bolster is a thing still.
Yeah.
I feel like you probably don't need the rage generation during last stand
I was gonna say how
for
often
defensiveness.
For
How-
defensive purposes, correct. It definitely converts into like an offense defense loop when you go down to take outbursts later on, which is the tier
Right.
set replication.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think
So
that that's a cool
without-
choice. Like, you
Mhm.
know, offense, defense, you're making a choice, right?
so without
Yeah,
that though, you basically can get everything, or you
Yes.
you take everything basically.
and like there's some good skips here too. Like I would not take best serve cold on a raid boss, but booming voice is an absolute good choice always.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the middle left tree, it has a lot of M plus focused utility for the most part, except that at the bottom, the choice node for heavy repercussions, that is a really good raid talent that is buried underneath AoE damage and utility. I don't know how I feel about that because heavy repercussions is still really good for M plus 2.
I was actually kind of thinking I don't like the left middle part of the tree. And I think it actually kind of opens up like I think swap challenging shout with disrupting shout and it doesn't feel as bad.
Agreed. That would be actually awesome. The one thing that I'll say here, because Wowhead isn't showing it, is Disrupting Shout actually replaces Challenging Shout. So that's why they have them in this order. So they
Then it needs to be a
wouldn't ever
choice
change
node.
it.
No, that is terrible. And I think that that'll probably change at some point because every spec that has had, oh, you have to select this thing, and then if you want the thing that like replaces it currently, right? Like that's a separate talent.
Yeah, you have to spend
Like,
2
they changed-
points.
Like they changed as Ellie Sham before, you had Fire Ellie, and then halfway down the tree on the right, you had Storm Ellie that replaced it. Now it's a choice node at the top. Like when
Yeah.
you select your elemental, you're selecting Fire or Storm.
It's a good point. I will point out though that in order for them to do that, they would have to give something to Challenging Shout that differentiates it. Because right now, Disrupting Shout is Challenging Shout with an extra effect. They both have the AoE taunt. Disrupting
Whoa.
Shout additionally interrupts them.
I also,
So-
to your point, Cheat, it feels really bad having to take an AoE taunt just to get down to heavy repercussions. When you don't,
Correct.
when you're not going to need it in any real raid boss setting.
That being said, there are some scenarios where I think you might even skip this entire middle left portion entirely for raid because there are other shield slam heavy talents in the center and right side of the tree.
Sure.
So it could be better.
And you know what sucks
maybe
too is shield charge, and like shield charge sucks, right? Like you don't ever care to take shield charge, so it's like if you did get down to heavy repercussions, you're just putting so many points in your left side to get to nothing. Like you don't want what's below it, so that just
right.
kinda feels bad.
So I will counter that a little bit. If you look at the very bottom left talent, Champions Bulwark, this is the Reprisal Legendary renamed. And in M+, this still has a lot of power. My biggest gripe with Shield Charge and functionality is the minimum range. Like, I feel like this has almost no place in the game when Charge already has a minimum range. Why do they both need to have it? And, like, you can't proc Champions Bulwark off Intervene anymore.
I was about to
That's
say
really
that's
puzzling
just bad
decision.
though, right? Like that's reprisal, but not worth it because you're taking this ability that's not even that great on its own that you don't really want anyway. But like the current version of reprisal is charge and intervene, give it. So it's like you can like charge in, get it on pull, intervene out to a DPS,
Yeah.
and charge back in. Like this is more restrictive, and it's a 45-second cooldown.
Yeah, champion.
Like, you're not-
They need to do two things to make this more enticing. One, add charge back to reprisal, and two, get rid of the minimum range on shield charge.
Yeah.
Or like
Then
if
I
it
would
felt
consider it.
good, or if it felt good to invest in the left side here, and then you're there, right? And it's like, oh well, this is here, cool.
Yeah, like you want to
Then
come
it's
through the middle
bad.
just to grab like Enduring Alacrity just for more armor, and then like you're basically like you can skip all this and then skip the bottom.
It's funny you mention that because both the left and right side 20 points have armor intros.
Oh shit! Except one's crit, one's haste.
I'm not a fan of this again, but I mean, the way shield charge is built right now, why are we going to take it when Ravager exists in M+?
Yeah.
So that's that's okay. So the middle part of the tree, right below shield wall, has some interesting stuff going on. Because you can go DPS focus with execute via massacre. Anger management is right there. It's not always required, but you're probably going to take it because it's a feedback loop with Avatar.
And it
then
kind of is a free point, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And then over here on the right, which is what you're looking at,
It's so cool.
There's a group cooldown here. It's not a
I'm
raid
so
cooldown, it's a
excited
group
about
cooldown.
that. Yeah.
But bringing that back, which I think its first incarnation was the Dragon Soul 4-piece, if I remember correctly. That was incredible group utility. And the fact that I had 2 charges, so I could save one for myself and still have another one for the group at the time, it felt like I had a much bigger impact on the raid than simply sitting there and getting my face bashed in.
And
Dude,
imagine how it feels in Mythic Plus.
I
now.
love this in M+
Now
too.
that Mythic Plus is a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how fucking cool is that?
2 charges.
Like, that is such a feels good.
Every 3.5 minutes on 2 charges. So if you use it halfway through, like you're just getting 20% DR for your party every day. So it's so good. Like it's just unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And there are scenarios where you don't even need to take that, and this brings up the possibility of taking the wall, which is a really good legendary on its own if it were not already overshadowed by reprisal in current Shadowlands. So now you've got additional rage generation that's going to be available, especially on tie weeks for bosses.
Right.
That's critical when you're constantly pushing out shield slam resets. So I like the positioning of this talent and the fact that it leads into at least focus vigor, which you're probably going to always take on that side of the tree. That's a good connection, in my opinion. Let's look at the right middle for a second. The structure of this is garbage because Fueled by Violence is limited to deep wounds. I hate that. They should allow Rend to work as well. Brutal Vitality is so useless for Prot. I can't even begin to describe.
I was actually about to ask how you feel about that with the, thought of having like a very heavy AoE consistent damage build where it's like, does this create just an unkillable on trash?
It does and it doesn't. So you know how they buffed Ignore Pain recently to be 55% of damage taken is absorbed instead of 50? This means Ignore Pains get eaten up faster, even in AoE situations. So unless the bleeds are ticking every second and a half or so, you're going to like lose an Ignore Pain, and then a bunch of ticks are going to happen that don't add to an Ignore Pain because maybe you didn't have the rage to put it back up yet. That's why I hate this talent being in prod as opposed to like the class tree, because if Ignore Pain was still a thing for the other specs, that conduit got great value. Well, I wonder, Pain wouldn't get used immediately, but you could keep adding on while you're pumping damage.
I was about to say, but I wonder, like, does it have a cap on it? Can it go above like the ultimate cap of the Ignore Pain absorb? Because if it can,
it does not have a cap. So it can go above. Oh, they nerfed this a little bit too.
I'm just thinking about like the things like, what if you run into just a, like an Arden Wield pool, right? Where you're going in and you slap down Ravager, you jump in with Avatar, Dragon's Roar.
You got your bleeds rolling.
You shockwave everything and get your bleeds rolling, and everything's
there is a
and you're
sequence
just
where
like
that works.
building up this unkillable, like I think it being there is cool. I think swap this choice node with the choice node below it, and it's because I think the choice node below it is kind of like a like it doesn't feel necessary to take. You could take the points around it.
Honestly, both of them feel that way to me, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I would like to see this though moved to as like a leaf node, maybe like
Yeah.
off to the side, or like if Hack said, if you switch it, you can path around it if you wanted to.
Yep. You've actually already got points in it, but Bloodborne here is a really interesting addition to a potential bleed heavy build that we were talking about, and I'm pretty sure this bonus will stack multiplicatively with Thunderous Words.
Right.
So especially if you were to try and set up the Shockwave combo that Hackd mentioned, where you go in, Shockwave, put up Ignore Pain, and immediately Thunderous Roar, like that's going to be huge, because I'm pretty sure like the initial damage from Thunderous Roar being front loaded will also be counted as a bleed.
As someone who doesn't play tanks, seeing the current damage of like Prot Pally and Blood DK with Jailer Wep, like does this, with that stuff going away, like this definitely I think puts Prot Warrior in Mythic Plus, like large group pulls, high keys, in contention to be like the highest damage tank, depending on what happens with the other class trees and stuff. But just initially, like at first look,
if the revenge bug goes through.
That's funny. We're kind of taking a lot of time on Prot, but I want to point out Devastator in middle is almost gonna for sure be required still. It's to the left side of Rend and Blood Scourge.
This right here.
What makes Devastator?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, that's for sure gonna be required still, unless they like drastically make Devastate feel better to push as a button.
To your point about us running long, I always say I want to keep it to 90 minutes, and then Hackd and I end up talking for 2.5 hours. So like, don't worry about it. It's cool.
Nice.
In a second, I'm gonna shut up. But I think you've got some actually cool options to still take heavy repercussions without like losing out too much. Like I think that you could lose out on Outburst, which is like the tier set, and still take the cheat death and still make it through challenging shout, either disrupting shout or Thunderlord, or like just one of the three in the middle on the left there, and then get heavy repercussions or into the fray. Or you can still drop that like we were thinking earlier, and like you can just get so much. And I feel like the things that you do need to drop are like, I think the decision is meaningful there. So I kind of like where Prot lands.
I can't see a scenario where Outburst is ever skipped, though.
And
the reason for that is because the stuff surrounding it, there's only one other mandatory talent there, in my opinion, which is Indomitable.
Indomitable, yeah.
Yeah. Spell block in its current design is absolute trash.
But I wonder also, like, you could actually skip Battlescarred Veteran and do the same thing, too. Like, if you're in... And I think that's awesome, like, you only take it if you're like pushing the high of the high, but like if you feel like you're unkillable, you're just like, well, I'm gonna drop this point. I'm never proccing it, so I'm gonna play
that'd be like on the
okay.
level of me having a Splintered Heart and it never proccing in a dungeon, right? Like, if that's the regular scenario, then that's definitely worth swapping a choice.
I think that that's a worthy trade out too. To like, oh well, I'm set up right now, having everything I want. I don't have the cheat death, but I do have heavy repercussions. Well, shit. Well, I want the cheat death, so. I have to drop heavy repercussions to get the cheat death. I think that that's a fine choice to make, and then that makes you make the choice. Okay, well, now that that choice is made, I could drop Thunderlord for Disrupting Shout, or drop Disrupting Shout for Thunderlord, or take the choice in the middle, right? And
I do think though that
there's a lot of really cool choices with Prot Warrior right now, and again, just talking through it, I think it's in a way better spot than I thought before we talked through.
Last thing I'll say, from my perspective, is they have to do something with the Storm of Steel capstone below Ravager, because right now it's straight trash. It's one extra tick of Ravager. This is literally nothing. It is the least value capstone of any spec I have seen so far.
So you just skip that, you get another 5% stam and armor and 2% haste.
I was about to say, what I was just talking about was taking that. So it's like there's another point you could just take out. There you go.
It definitely looks good that like you get everything you want up top, you basically get everything you need in the middle, and you get to fill out like the full 2 bottoms basically. Like obviously this is kind of shit, so like, but you can still get Ravager, you can come down and get all 5 down here, And like, unless they make this better, like you don't even really have to worry about this, but hopefully they make this worth going into at some point. But like, I think Prot looks extremely strong right now.
Yeah.
They haven't really done too much shifting on this tree. They've sort of just added a couple of connections. And I'm really impressed with it, but I think one of the things that excites me the most is that I feel like I might be in a position in a raid encounter setting with a typical boss and a few ad spawns to be able to do great damage to both instead of having to pick one or the other, because you can pick a lot of shield slam heavy talents and still pick up some of the bleed damage as well.
Right.
Right. Maybe not all, but some, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that that's okay. Like if you're going heavy into one, but you still get like minor benefit from another side or build, like
what's the goal, right? You don't want to feel completely gimped when you have to, okay, I'm doing single target. I'm just worried about boss damage that maybe has some ads, periodically, but like I can still be effective on those ads even with my like main boss damage tanking build. Like that feels awesome, right? Because then you just feel like you're useful in those situations instead of just like, all right, well, I'll just like stand here and push ignore pain and not die. Like, like, so yeah, Prot is looking good. Let me reset for Fury here so Astrid can hear about his one hand focus build and see how that feels for him. I don't want to spend as much time obviously on the class tree for Fury since we've gone over like most of the nodes, but just any like major changes mostly to the bottom of the tree.
We know we talked about stances a lot, so we don't need to cover that.
I'm just going to take enough points to get down.
For Fury at the bottom of the tree is going to be, where did they put that? Below Avatar. So they split the Tormented King's effect, bottom left.
Yeah, I'm just getting enough to get down to it so I can actually have it lit up.
In Shadowlands today, the Tormented King's effect for Mythic Plus. When you cast Avatar, you randomly cast Bladestorm or Recklessness. When you cast Recklessness, you randomly cast Bladestorm or Avatar. What they did below Avatar here is split the Tormented King's effect into a single target and an AoE variation, which is amazing because it removes the RNG component associated with this frustrating legendary. Like, it's really cool when the legendary worked out in your favor in M+ and always cast Bladestorm when it could. Now you don't have to worry about that. I think since Avatar is probably going to be a required component for a lot of Fury builds, this makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they decided to take this approach.
Yeah, because how bad did it feel? Like you're running Tormented Kings and like you're on a single target boss and like, oh, well, I cast Bladestorm and I'm getting like almost no value out of it right now. Like, cool, thanks, Lego. Like,
it's actually interesting because that's actually the least of the bad scenarios, because you still got up to full rage within 2 ticks of Bladestorm, and then you just cancel it and you keep doing the rotation. Whereas in AoE, if you proc Avatar, that was always a feel bad moment.
Yeah. I hate having to cancel. Like I even though yes, you get your full rage bar, but like, all right, well, I have to cancel my legendary effect. Like that sucks.
Cancel or Bladestorm has been on my Rampage button for the entire expansion pretty much because of it.
It's like the old having to clip your Fist of Fury on Monk. Like anything like that is not directly intended to work that way. And to min-max and play optimally, you have to do something that is unintended by the game. Just feels awful.
I think this should be Ravager or Odin's Fury. I feel like if you don't take Odin's Fury, then like if you don't go down the left side in Fury, it needs to be like maybe it just defaults to Odin's Fury if you have both. But if you don't have Odin's Fury and you have Ravager, I think it should drop Ravager.
That's an interesting idea. I'm wondering how they would resolve it.
Especially if you have the capstone, right, for Ravager in the Fury tree, and it's like the Odin's Fury that it casts sucks because like you don't have the Odin's Fury capstone anyway, so it's just like a shitty Odin's Fury.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I just don't know how they would communicate it to the player with how the UI is set up right now. It would be a little confusing. I think their intent is probably to make Odin's Fury a strong ability regardless of whether you power it up or not. That's how it felt in Legion, and if it doesn't feel like that now, then they'll have failed in my view.
Mm.
I loved
So,
pushing Odin's Fury and Legion. It was
by far
great.
the best button Fury had.
Yeah.
In Legion, without question.
All right. So we're taking Avatar basically guaranteed for Fury. What else down here?
I think Thunderous Roar with Thunderous Words is a possibility for AoE.
Okay.
If you can reach it, because that buffs all of that. That buffs Odin's Fury. You'll have some bleed capability coming if you decide to focus on that side of the tree anyways.
Right.
So could
All right.
definitely be interesting depending on the strength of Odin's Fury and M+.
So you do have some options down here, and you can grab Spear if you need it. I don't know if you're ever really going to be taking Shockwave much as Fury.
I think it's just hard to, right?
Yeah.
Because of the stamina talent, unless you're in like an AoE
Yeah.
heavy encounter and raid where you need the avoidance.
Yeah.
Why?
And then you're obviously taking dual wield spec all the time.
When we get into the tree, I can sort of cover it a little bit more, but briefly, Spear of Bastion with Elysian Might is a really good pick for single-minded Fury, because it's going to be a crit focused build in that scenario, and Elysian Might still gives you additional crit damage while you remain in the area, and it's an 8-second duration.
So you just come down
there's
this way.
Big value
Yeah.
to be had from that for SMF.
Is Crushing Force still dead for Fury? Like, you're never casting Slam, right?
Not in the Raging Blow build. The
Okay.
SMF build on the left side actually brings Slam back.
Ugh, I don't know if I like
I
that.
think-
Also, I don't like it either, and there's also one way to
think
bring it
people
back
were
for Raging
playing-
Blow. But I would
People
never
were
use it.
playing with like a no rampage build where it's just like you're spamming the fuck out of Bloodthirst and it's doing insane damage.
So I guess
And you're going to slam.
as the Resident Warrior player, why would they not just do the change for this and make it just affect Raging Blow instead of Slam? Like,
I
why
think this
bring
goes-
Slam back? I don't.
I think this goes to a high level discussion where they want to remove the APM heavy playstyle of Fury, or at least not remove it, but offer an alternative option.
Okay.
Because we're not into the Fury tree yet, but if you look at the very bottom left talent on Fury called Annihilator, this ability actually replaces Raging Blow. So you no longer have the ability to cast
Oh.
Raging Blow, which removes a ton of GCDs that you needed to use.
So then you would grab this Slam. So then you're filling some of those GCDs with Slam.
Correct. And if you
Okay.
look at the talent right above it called Storm of Swords, it gives Slam increased damage, rage gen, but adds a cooldown. Again, reducing APM required for the spec.
Gotcha. So this is going to be soon as I push 40, the build I'm going to play when I play Fury, because my fingers can't keep up anymore.
That's right.
Yeah, gotcha.
But only when you hit 40. Like when you're the day before your birthday, you can still play whatever you want.
Okay, yeah, I can go to the other side of the tree.
I don't even know if that makes it less APM though, like, because it just turns Slam into Raging Blow,
Well, that's a
But, like-
6-second cooldown,
right? But Raging Blow has an 8-second cooldown.
but 2 charges that.
But two charges.
Reset.
Yeah, but like, I don't think it kills the APM like by that much.
It's enough for my 40-year-old hands.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. I guess I don't see any scenario where you're gonna pick up Storm of Swords and also pick up Cruelty or Raging Armaments on the right side of the tree. So to Hack's
Okay.
point, it's not removing APM. So, but the APM also isn't there
Okay.
to be had. So
Okay.
like, yeah, like a lot of the stuff we're used to being baseline for Fury, you now have to pick up for Raging Blow reset, like Cruelty. So
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Well, are we good for the class tree, or was there anything else you wanted to point out? I think that was the only question I had, was around, is Crushing Force just dead for Fury? Like, it's just kind of feels bad that it's just in the middle of the tree there. But that
My
answers my
only
question.
Gripe is how easy it is for Fury to pick up like the 5% leech when they're the spec that is arguably needs it the least.
Yeah.
yeah, I could see that being a valid complaint.
They
But it's-
are
it's
gonna be
the only
tanky as
source
fuck.
of Leech, whereas like Prot doesn't have. Prot has 2
Right.
versions of it.
Yeah. They are gonna be
Berserker Sage
tanky,
needs to
tanky.
feel better, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Alright.
that's their penalty for picking up the Leech for free, is they get this really shitty talent that they're gonna
Yeah,
just
that
spend
you're never
another
gonna
point
push.
on.
It'd be cool.
Yeah.
You know what would be cool? Now that we've talked, like if Berserker Stance just like, I don't know, made Leech like slightly better when you were in Berserker Stance.
Yeah.
You know, like you could switch over to Berserker Stance if you get low or something to like amplify your Leech percentage that you've got, and then you just switch back to Battle Stance or something, almost as another defensive. I guess that wouldn't really fit with the whole Berserker name, but they have to do something to it.
I think
Okay.
Berserker could see use for SMF because it's a very auto attack focused build.
Okay.
But that remains to be seen.
Well, let's get into it. Astrand, hopefully you're still here and watching so you can hear about...
I'm really good at putting people to sleep, so maybe we need to like wake him up, you know, talk the mics a little bit.
Yeah, hey, Astrand, hello. All right, so Bloodthirst, Raging Blow, and now we're actually into the tree proper. He's here, he's here.
First 3 rows are completely required, so not much to talk about there.
Okay.
Imagine trying to like not take improved enrage and make a viable build. That would just never happen, right? So
and I guess you're never taking really the speed talent then on Fury just because you have improved enrage. You don't like
correct.
need another 5%.
Yep. I do like some of the choices to get to 8 point that exist on this 3rd row here.
Okay.
Because in a Raging Blow build, for example, it's more enrage focused, so you don't need the extra Bloodthirst damage from improved Bloodthirst, but the guaranteed enrage on first Bloodthirst on a target is amazing. Sudden Death is a good pickup. Warpaint is nearly required for enrage build. You might actually see Warpaint get skipped for Bloodthirst builds because you're not going to have as much enrage uptime, so the value goes down quite a bit.
Gotcha.
Or Bloodthirst builds?
Yeah, because you're not going to
Bloodthirst
be...
builds would have like fresh meat, right?
I don't actually think that's a guaranteed pick for SMF. It's a really good talent, but most of the SMF build isn't enrage focused. So I think if you were going to take fresh meat, it would be if you wanted to potentially maximize damage reduction from Warpaint.
Gotcha. So are we doing the SMF build first then?
Yes, let's talk SMF.
Okay.
Before we go into details, Blizzard did this thing, I want to say it was 3 weeks ago, where they're like, SMF is being offered as an option, but it's always going to underperform Titan's Group and Raging Blow. We just want to offer it for people that like that playstyle. And people gave them the absolutely correct feedback of, that is stupid. Why would you build an entire left side of a tree that's a trap for people? So in the last alpha build prior to beta today, they actually did some tuning to a lot of the talents on the single-minded Furious side of the tree. Stuff like Frenzied Flurry, where they increased the chance to enrage. They changed the cadence of Fujita talent to be more auto attack focused instead of granting raw haste, which lowers its value for Raging Blow, makes it better for SMF. In general, that entire left middle is all focus, really good stuff for SMF and Bloodthirst. And the no Rampage Bloodthirst spam build is actually predicated on a lot of the stuff you see on the left side there. As I recall, Bloodthirst cooldown scales with haste, so inversely with haste. So I think that's why they changed cadence of Fujita to auto attack damage or auto attack speed from haste, because that was enabling the Bloodthirst spam.
Gotcha.
So
you just keep you just keep spamming that and just have your haste just maxed the whole time.
Yeah, and in that scenario, you wouldn't need fresh meat either, because you're spamming Bloodthirst so often, the odds are you're going to have an enrage up the whole time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that sort of adds some value to fresh meat for M+, maybe not so much for raids. Middle part of the tree is fun because you can go either way with the builds. I think because Rampage is a key part of the build, since it's your only spender, Frenzy becomes required. I think the haste scales very well and multiplicatively with the auto attack speed of SMF, and it's a good way to connect to Recklessness without having to pick up the other 2 talents.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about the value of Slaughtering Strikes, especially for SMF. They lowered the value per stack, so you can only get maximum of 15% benefit from Annihilator. But because you're using a one-hander and attacking so fast, you might already have that stacked up to max before your next rampage is even possible.
Huh.
It's a weird talent because this is one of those. It's gonna be pretty cool, but also I don't ever have to think about it.
Yeah, just passive.
Yep. The middle talent is for SMF virtually dead. I don't actually know what this even does if you take Annihilator. But right now, we don't know. So that could be more useful. Like maybe they change Hack and Slash to be something completely different.
Right.
For Annihilator, maybe I can check that on beta later. I haven't had a chance to look. But overall, the middle has a good balance of choices. On the right side, Improve Whirlwind for multi-target, absolutely required even for SMF. If you want to go Meat Cleaver, that requires even more point investment. But they've got it split, so you're not really forced to take like a lot of Raging Blow stuff to get there. You can even
that's
skip.
kind of what I was looking for. Like looking through, it's like there's
You can even skip
some
Improve Raging Blow
stuff.
You can skip Improve Raging Blow and take Sudden Death to reach Improve Whirlwind for SMF.
Right.
Yeah, it just creates a thing where it's like the fact that you can take Annihilator and still take Improved Raging Blow feels weird, right? Like just the fact that it's possible at all to like take a point that gives you 0 value because you don't even have access to the ability.
Yeah, and I honestly can't even like link this to like a live and learn scenario, like the way talents worked all the way through Cataclysm when people would make bad choices, because at least every talent you put in from vanilla to Cataclysm had some sort of benefit tied to it, even if it wasn't optimal, right?
Right.
So,
So
even
definitely a
not
very
even
good
the
point.
fact that you can even take like Improve Raging Blow, just the fact that there are some Raging Blow nodes that are still in the way that you have to take. It's not a lot, but the fact that there's any when you take Annihilator and you're trying to get down to something else, the fact that you have to take anything that just buffs Raging Blow is not okay.
Yep.
So
and there's actually a really good point about that below the right side we'll get to. I don't like the 2-point nodes positioning on the left and right. And the reason for that is because SMF is going to prefer crit because of Cold Steel, Hot Blood. Raging Blow is going to prefer Mastery, and they're juxtaposed in their positions on the tree.
Right.
Yeah, critical thinking should come over to deft and then flip flop.
Yep.
I also don't like that coming out of the top here, to get out of either Sudden Death or Improve Raging Blow, you have to take an AoE improvement talent. Like, I would just rather see them like swap it with Cruelty, or one of these other non-AoE talents, and then just allow you to path around it if you didn't want Whirlwind.
Correct, because like you're in a scenario now where if you want to build SMF for a pure patchwork boss, you have to take Improve Whirlwind to pick up Siegebreaker below it.
Right. That feels terrible.
Which is just silly.
Yeah. So don't like that. I would rather just see Cruelty moved here, or move Siegebreaker, I guess. But then you're forced into taking Siegebreaker to go down. So.
But why? Wait, hold on. Never mind. Wait, why wouldn't you take Improved Whirlwind for Siegebreaker anyway?
But why would you need Improved Whirlwind in a single target boss? If you're doing a single target build.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay. Even if you skip Improve Raging Blow, you still have to take Sudden Death to get to Improve Whirlwind to continue down the right side. And
maybe they just made me think of something here, though, Rain.
Maybe they just switch Siegebreaker with Improved Whirlwind, put Improved Whirlwind in the middle, where
that's either that or just switch Cruelty or something.
Right.
So let's go back to the stated goal from Blizzard of less APM on Single-Minded Fury with Annihilator. Improved Whirlwind, without the cooldown that gets artificially added to it by Storm of Swords, that almost adds APM back, because that would become your default filler. I think that's why Storm of Swords has to gate Annihilator in their design. And so its position sort of makes sense, but you're never going to press Whirlwind unless you have literally nothing else to press.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't like. I think that's like a somewhat niche scenario where you would much rather just move this, like, because you could still go get it if you wanted to do like this low APM build, and you could still go get it if it was switched, but like to force you into taking an improved AoE talent in a single target build where you need to come down this side, just they should just swap it. It's an easy fix, I feel like. All right, so we're still moving down. I have a bunch of extra stuff selected because I was just pushing buttons. So
yeah, no, you're totally fine. I don't actually have my own points selected to be able to keep going, so sorry about that.
No, you're good.
The bottom of the tree for Single-Minded Fury presents interesting. There's not like a great way to really focus on single target versus AoE. There's a lot of balance, I think, to add to Rage Economy. For SMF, you're going to want to take Onslaught. I actually think that's going to be a pick for Raging Blow build as well. But I don't think it's Capstone, for example, Pulverize is a pick for SMF. I think in the middle part here where you've got Anger Management or Reckless Abandon, Reckless Abandon, I feel, loses a lot of its power when you don't have the 4-piece tier bonus from Shadowlands right now, which has a chance on Raging Blow hits to extend the duration of Recklessness by 3 seconds. Now, they've sort of brought a little bit of that back with Unbridled Ferocity below it, which is the left one. There you go. But it's tied to Rampage. That's right. That's a good compromise between both sides, right? Because Raging Blow is not a thing if you take Annihilator. But the chance to proc is so much lower that it simply doesn't have the value compared to taking Skull Banner. Like, yeah. Skull Banner on this node is going to win in nearly every scenario except solo world content. And even then, it's probably still going to be pretty good. Like, you come up on a really hard rare and you want to burst it down, Skull Banner is where you're going with that.
I do want to talk to you about Skull Banner when we're done with Fury.
Absolutely. I do like the capability, if you're going to take 2 capstones, to take Skull Banner with Depths of Insanity. However, Depths of Insanity, the duration increase is not enough right now.
Okay.
On live, it's like 8 seconds or something crazy. With the max level conduit, 4 seconds is really weak.
Yeah, that doesn't seem worth in with the current tuning.
Yep. One thing I will point out for SMF in an AoE situation is it has really easy access to Odin's Fury and the Bloodborne talent, which increases the damage of Odin's Fury, Gushing Wound, and Thunderous Roar. I think this puts SMF in a scenario to potentially slap on Fort Weeks and M+, to a great degree. Because the mobs are going to be more likely to last more often, which gives you maximum uptime on bleeds. That'll be really interesting to experiment with. Who knows if they hit the balance where they want it. But I'm definitely interested to see how that pans out. I'm hoping it's not so good that I have to carry 2 pairs of weapons. That is my like living nightmare scenario for Fury gearing, because it's already bad enough. You have to get 2 2-handers. Now I got to get 2 1-handers as well. Like, I hate that.
So this was going to be my question for you. The 2 separate questions. First is about, so with Single-Minded Fury and your Fury loot spec, does that mean now you're going to roll 1- and 2-handed weapons in your loot spec?
Because that's actually already the case today.
Oh,
SMF
really?
Is already in Fury as a passive today. So in Shadowlands, for the entirety of the expansion, once I realized that they had messed this up, I have been rolling arms loot spec because I had to guarantee 2-handed loot drop.
Right, because it would feel terrible to get a 1-handed loot drop as Fury currently.
Yep. Luckily, I discovered it in M+, so my first vault wasn't wasted, but boy, would I have been mad if I rolled a 1-handed in my vault.
Exactly. So that essentially makes your gearing process for Fury excruciating to have to get 4 weapons.
It does, because you either, let's say you want to be flexible and you want to play Titan's Grip or SMF depending on the scenario. You roll Fury loot spec. Now the RNG of the loot drop is determining which spec you're going to start playing.
And then if
first.
tuning on one or the other is poor, like if SMF is tuned out of control and is really good, and you get a two-hander, well, now you just feel bad not being able to play SMF. And then the opposite is also true if it's tuned poorly and you get a one-hander and you're like, well, I guess I have to play this until I get a two-hander, and my damage is just not going to be as good as it could have been, because so you're almost locked into looking at tuning and then being like, all right, well, I'm just staying arm spec.
Well, so one thing, I was just watching the stream. One thing about
Hack had to make a
SMF is
poopy.
overtuned, and you know that ahead of time, and it feels bad. Like, you know, SMF is good, so it's like, oh, it feels bad that I got a two-hander. And in that thing, you just go prot loot spec.
Yeah.
Like, then it feels bad that if you get a shield.
Right.
Right, exactly. That's the exact point I was going to
Or a
get to.
defensive
That's
trinket.
The problem that exists. Like,
Yeah,
single-minded
that's
Fury is in a unique scenario of being like sandwiched between loot spec capability. I think they really need to, for Fury specifically, add like a sub loot spec for this scenario, because not only could you potentially loot a shield by going prot loot spec, you can now have your loot slot wasted with a tank trinket.
Yep.
If you're focused on
or
SMF.
something like this too. Like, so I would argue against it for like the arms thing that we're going to get into later, but for single-minded Fury, I think the idea works to where, like, get rid of single-minded Fury specifically, keep the node where it is, but make it while dual wielding one-handers, you get this. While dual wielding two-handers, you get this. That way, it's like you're not locking out part of the talent tree, or like you don't have the option, right? Like, the problem still exists where like one is tuned better, it feels bad to get that weapon, but like
That's
think
actually not a bad idea.
I think for this specific thing, it works to make these nodes, you know, double. Like,
Right.
oh, it does
Yes.
this if you're wearing two-handers, it does this if you're wearing one-handers.
Right.
I think
Exactly,
it makes less sense
and-
for arms, but for this, it makes sense, I think.
Yeah, and also that's a really good way to elegantly still allow like a fast auto attack build that plays into Annihilator, or you're just going there because you need the two-handed weapon damage, and then you skip the rest of that and go to Odin's Fury from like the haste 2-pointer.
Well, you could
It
even
doesn't solve the problem that like one is one is gonna be better than the other, right?
Mhm.
At least in like different scenarios. So it's like it's
think-
still gonna feel bad because you're gonna want two sets of weapons regardless, because one is gonna be better than the other in different scenarios.
Yeah.
I mean, unless like single-minded Fury is just worse, or you know, vice versa in every scenario, then it's fine. But again, it still feels bad if you get the wrong drop.
Right,
you get a
right. You still
one-handed
have to
drop
navigate
instead
the
of a
loot
two-hander.
gambit that is going to happen as you're trying to get into the good spec. Go ahead.
I don't have a whole lot to say on Titan's group build right now, precisely because the way you can build Raging Blow feels exactly like it does in Shadowlands today, and the spec plays amazingly. I like that they've brought back that capability, and
I
there
was
are
about to say, and
still
that's a
interesting
good thing,
choices.
right? Because like
Yes.
it's fun. It's already
There
a
are still
pretty
interesting
solid spec.
choices.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one comment I'll say for M plus build is, what are they doing with Ravager in here? Because it doesn't synergize with anything. It's really only about the rage generation. Unless the damage is just like scaling out of control, I don't see a scenario where I'd ever take this over just something that's focused with Odin's
Right.
Fury,
Which,
bleed
you know,
damage, and Signet.
Which
From the
Fury is
case.
always going to care about rage generation less than the other two specs anyway, just because you have on-demand APM buttons to just generate until you're full and you spend. So,
Exactly.
right,
And
so-
honestly, if you want good rage gen that's niche, that's not niche, excuse me, the onslaught talent right next to it is probably going to fit into nearly every build. You don't even have to take its
Is that
Keystone.
is that similar to like Skull Splitter? That's pretty much Skull Splitter for arms, right?
Yes.
Pretty much
yes.
the same thing. Okay.
Onslaught is actually a talent pick right now. It's a talent choice, excuse me, right now. Just no one
Okay.
takes it because on
Really?
the tier it's on, there's just better choices.
Gotcha. All right. So here's my next question for you, and it's around Skull Banner. So it is strong, right? It's 20% crit for your party members. On a 3-minute CD, like to only last 10 seconds, that part of it feels a little weak. And the fact that this puts, because this exists for arms and fury, correct?
Does it? Yes.
So Now,
I mean, including yourself. So right, like this is
Yeah,
a 3-minute damage cooldown for yourself.
It
for,
is.
like SMF build.
but this essentially in a raid scenario puts
Fury only.
it's Fury only.
Oh no, wait, sorry. Arms has it, but it's in a completely different location.
Okay.
Look at that.
So this puts the classes that really like excel with this is like Fire Mage and Elisham, right? For this crit.
Oh, critical damage.
Yeah. So does that now mean you're putting your warrior in your ranged group and not giving them Wind Fury?
For a 3-minute cooldown, you're not.
Right.
Doing that.
So now you're putting Skull Banner ends up in an unoptimal group because you're not going to put your Elisham and your Mage in your Wind Fury group. So I think it loses some value just because of how it works, being party only.
I kind of agree. I think that it's limited to party because otherwise it would be you can't ever not pick this thing.
Right. It'd be mandatory.
Which it was super powerful in raid when it still existed in that form where it was raid wide.
Was it a 3-minute cooldown though?
Yes, it was a 3-minute cooldown.
Was it? Okay.
I believe it lasted 10 seconds, but the critical damage was 30% instead of 20.
It's super strong, but I don't know if it's going to be like an optimal choice. Like I think you may just like take Unbridled Ferocity.
Right. I think it's a niche choice.
Yeah. Or
for,
like
very specific things, like you want to pop this on Sludge Fist first pillar with Lust with your boomies and your Fire Mages.
This just has shades of like vanilla and BC where you had to like get the fucking spreadsheet matrix of like, okay, I need my warrior in this group with the shaman to give Wind Fury to this warrior who then gives this buff to my hunters who then, you know, like it like becomes like impossibly complex for a normal group to navigate optimally.
I do think that this is teetering on the level of going just a little too far with party buffs.
Yeah.
Which they voice, you know, hey, if we're going too far that direction, we might need to back off.
Honestly,
think this is an opportunity to back off.
I kind of wish they would take Skull Banner and just
already have rally also, so you're just in warriors are in the raid. You have battle shout and rally.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't need this.
I kind of wish they take this and replace it with Necrolord Banner, and just
give Shaman Skull Totem.
All right, we
go.
already have so much hacked.
No, we don't.
Shaman
No,
Six
we
come
don't.
out.
We don't.
There it is.
Shaman does not have something that guarantees them a raid spot. This would do it. I think that this actually would fit better.
Don't listen to him, cheat.
Shaman or Shaman.
I think
the Shaman simp is speaking.
What? It's not like this ability feels good as the warrior.
No,
right?
I know.
it really doesn't unless unless it's off the GCD, which Skull Banner in the past was off GCD. So if it's off GCD, then it feels not as bad.
But even then, it doesn't feel like.
But I think this is going to be a priority pick for Mythic Raid in particular for fights where there's a key burn phase. Like
Definitely.
Absolutely.
You will definitely put like your biggest single target pumpers in here, and even if they're not crit focused, they're still going to get benefit out of it because you're probably like they're already going to be, you know, on a target immediately and gaining is perfect uptime. So at the mythic level, this is a required pick. I think below that, definitely a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I just think that this should get removed from warrior and go to shaman.
I think if they took this and made it crit damage 10%, crit chance 10%, then you could have flexibility to kind of put the warrior in any group and not have to put it basically just with Fire Mage and Elisham.
Right.
And then, so you just, instead of making it like so singularly, like, because that's a niche damage profile as it is, crit damage increase specifically. Like if you just spread it between actual chance and damage, then then the warrior can go into basically any group and have much greater benefit than the way that it's designed right now.
And also think about like Fury Warrior specifically doesn't like benefit a ton from crit. They do, right? But like they're not in that niche that like Fire Mage and Elisham would be. And I think that Ellie and Resto, or at least Ellie, right? Like needs something that puts them in the raid. So I think that, and this isn't even me like shaman simping. I just think that this is like such a perfect thing for elemental to have to bring to like guarantee a raid spot versus like enhancement having Wind Fury and Resto having
I miss more utility
Nanotide
totems than Wind Fury.
or
You know?
Yeah.
yeah. So like, I mean, Resto isn't guaranteed, but Spirit Link is fucking dope. Like, so
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
case can always be made for that, especially with like AG coming back. I know I'm
Yeah.
dipping off a little bit, but like I just think that this ability, especially with Elemental Shaman specifically being that niche to where like they are a huge beneficiary of crit damage. It's like,
Give them the ability that
well,
gives them crit damage.
yeah, and it saves Warrior from having to not be in a Wind Fury group because they need to be in a caster group. Like, have like we've had for especially all of Shadowlands, we have the all melee group with Wind Furies in them. We've never really had like an all ranged group with just like the ranged buffing the other range and like having just a ranged skull totem group.
Right.
Right?
There's no reason to put the
think
range
that
together
that's
outside of just like organization, like,
Yep.
or like yeah. There's no reason to, basically. So.
And basically, my point there is I think that they could keep pushing with some of the party buffs that they still are right now. But I think that this pushes it a little too far to where it just becomes so much, beautiful mind shit.
Yeah.
Like this, giving it to like something like Elemental Shaman just alleviates that, right? Because it makes sense. You
Yeah.
don't have to overthink it. It just makes sense who you're putting in this group to benefit from it.
I have one quick thought on this, and then Cheat, I just want your final Fury thoughts. But what if, I don't know if you guys have played Path of Exile, but what if instead of just being something that you drop for your 3 minute 10 seconds, like Skull Banner either gained charges on kill if you're like using it for solo content, or every so much damage you did basically charges the totem, and then you can drop the totem for like a raid wide buff. Maybe not this
So
exact.
it becomes like an interesting gameplay loop for yourself
Mhm.
before you drop it.
So
it
there's
doesn't
a
feel like
banner
you're just
ability
giving
in
all the
PoE.
benefit to other people. Like you're at least getting like a fun benefit from it.
So the way that the ability works in PoE is the banner gains charges as you get kills, and then you hold those charges forever, and you get a small passive buff while you hold the max banner. And then when you drop it, it basically releases all the charges, and you get like this supercharged version of the buff.
That would be interesting because it sort of forces a backload of a raid wide cooldown. So it would be up to the warrior to ensure that they know like when this timing is going to work out. Are they going to have enough uptime on a boss while avoiding mechanics, etc., to be able to get it charged in time for like a critical burn phase? I think that's an interesting. That would be an interesting departure from the playstyle of you front load every single thing you have plus lust into the role of boss.
Yeah.
I think that could be really cool.
Yeah. So I think that's a potential option. Not that, maybe there's a Blizzard employee who will see this and like, oh my God, that's a great idea. Let's steal from Path of Exile. But like, I think it's also something that's different than just like, okay, 3 minute cooldown, push button, do thing. Like it's directly tied to your gameplay in terms of like charging it up. And it's almost like Disc Priest ramping for healing. Like the better you play, the better your ramp is. So like the faster you can do damage and charge the banner, the better the banner's value becomes.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe this is a choice node between Skull Banner and Conqueror's Banner.
What is the other choice on under Skull Banner right now?
Sidearm.
Auto attacks or weapons.
Sure. I have no thoughts on this talent.
It's a passive damage proc.
Yeah. Just
So
like a
see how it
cleave
I'll take
damage.
It if it tunes well.
All right, Cheat, final thoughts on Fury before we move on to arms.
I really like the balance that they're achieving between the current playstyle and being able to offer flexible choices. I do want to bring up a quick high-level topic that I discussed in the notes. I think Fury, as set up right now, is a really good example of Blizzard building so-called sub-specs into a single specialization that also tend to have a different theme. So single-minded Fury versus Titan's Grip. The various ability changes you can make between Ravager, Odin's Fury, not having to cast Raging Blow, even the Skull Banner thing is sort of thematic. And I'm wondering, are there any other specs that with Dragonflight redesigns accomplishing something like this?
Specifically in this way where you can have a single target single-minded and a single target Titan's Grip, an AoE single-minded and an AoE Titan's Grip. I don't think
The question is, are there any other specs that both look and feel different depending on who's playing it and how they do it?
I don't think to this
Shadow
extent.
Priest might, based on how we started the show, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one that could.
Currently, no.
Resto Shaman,
Mm-hmm.
100% can, I think. Just because they have, like, you could set up a hot build versus, like, what it plays as now already. So I think that I would call that a sub-spec, right? Like, creating a hot build for Resto Shaman, like, that's new. It's different, and I think
it's similar, but not like you have basically like two individual specs within the one tree, whereas like
that's what a sub-spec is.
No, I get it, but like the Resto Shaman build it's not as like, you're not building like a hot build that works in two separate ways. Like you're building a single-minded Fury single target, a single-minded Fury multi-target, a Titan's Grip single target, a Titan's Grip.
You mean like literally just single-minded Fury, or Titan's Grip Fury?
Right,
and
right.
then still like having the normal cadence that everybody else has of like, oh, AoE this or single target this or cleave this.
Yeah, I think it's like
right.
slightly more involved than the other specs. While the others, I think they've done a really good job of doing that with the other specs and giving you more viable choices. But the actual like full identity differences, I think Fury right now really is probably the best example of that. But we'll see what Shadow does.
I think Evoker Devastation originally was going down this route because you saw people that were focused on like a red versus blue build, but Blizzard has since moved away from that.
Yeah.
With them to sort of force you into both sides. Cool too,
because that does accomplish what Rain was just saying, where there was a red single target build and a red AoE build, and then there was a blue single target build and a blue AoE build.
Yeah.
And they,
I think brought up a really good example too with Frost DK, Breath versus Obliterate, and Dual Wield versus Two-Hander. People even on Shadowlands are finding ways to intermix those in ways that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I saw a two-hand Breath build that now was running, and I was like, what the fuck is this? What is happening? He's got a two-hander. Exactly. Why is he using Breath? Like, what the fuck is going on right now?
That's kind of what I'm getting at with like bringing back old playstyles, like, because my first thought from that is Enhancement Shaman. Like, just imagine a choice node at the top of the enhancement tree, right? That is like, hey, you either have Maelstrom Weapon or you have Maelstrom, like the bar of Maelstrom. And like, it completely just changes the rest of the tree based on like, okay, now you're playing a Builder Spender, or you're playing this like cooldown focused with like a resource proc, essentially.
Right.
Like, that just creates two different subspecs.
Yep.
But yeah, I do think that Fury does it best so far.
Yep. All right, let's blaze through arms here, because who gives a fuck about arms?
Yep, I'm out. See ya. My high-level thoughts on arms are, I think the spec can be fun. My biggest gripe with it has always been pacing. Blizzard has stated that as an acknowledged issue and want to address it, so I will give them benefit of the doubt and see if they can pull it off this time.
So I'm just gonna like run through like my super quick thoughts. Is I'm really excited about just the fact that they have the bleed build accessible with Rend Thunderclap spread, because it gives them a damage profile that they've not had in like ever, and it's so different just for AoE. So like you have bleed AoE versus burst AoE, which is fantastic, and I think they have the opportunity to still maintain like the strongest two target cleave in the game while creating a whole different damage profile that they've never had before in the consistent AoE with the bleed setup, which is awesome.
So I saw
Test of Might is back, which is just fucking dope.
I also saw they brought Massacre back at 35%. That's huge. Like, because I thought that was in there for prod as well, right?
Yeah, they did a bit of shuffling. So like Massacre and Sudden Death will flip between the class and the spec tree depending on which spec you're looking at. So that might
Oh, okay.
confuse people on glance, but
Yeah, I
both
see that now.
both choices exist for every spec.
So one gripe that I do have is I don't think arms is the execute spec anymore. Like they've always been like, if you need execute, you bring arms warrior. They are the execute.
Yeah.
I think, especially in this iteration with this talent tree, I think in other classes talent trees, I think other specs do execute better than execute, which is like, we call it execute for a reason, you know, like just.
Well, I think
It-
Blizzard over the
I think
last
not having that niche is something that they're really losing.
I think over the
time.
years Blizzard too has, to your point, they've started to take some of that away and spread it into some of the other classes.
It's just crazy to me that like execute isn't the strongest execute.
Yeah, right.
know,
the
What's
actual
what's the Fire Mage execute effect called? Let's just change it to that. Just call it the scorch window. Yeah.
Right. I don't even know what it's called off the top of my head, which I should.
Yeah,
But
I don't remember, so whatever.
I do like Hackd, you brought up that Testamite is back. I do like Testamite a lot just because any time that Blizzard gives us ways to play into like a skill gap, I enjoy. So like, okay, there's a decision to use your Colossus Smash, and then you're trying to dump as much rage as possible into the window because you want to get your strength buff on the back end of Colossus Smash. It's the same as how Shadow used to be with being able to extend the void form window with your insanity bar for as long as possible. Stuff like that, I think, is really fun, and I think is what makes specs fun, especially like, I don't think arms is super complex, but adding something like this definitely adds like a layer of complexity to the class to allow people who do play arms a lot something to kind of play into and play around with.
yeah, I just so I actually love arms. Like, so I don't know if it's my preferred warrior spec, but just playing it in the past, like, it's a different playstyle, so I think it's one of the few, like, Assassination Rogue is very similar, but I don't think that there's a bigger pooling class than Arms Warrior. And I think that it's a very specific playstyle that Arms does best, and they still have that option. So like, just adding back Testamite really plays into that, right? Like, you're pooling for this huge window.
Yeah.
And I think that they just have some awesome choices. I don't like. This is pretty common across all of the warrior stuff. They are very big into, hey, you have to select this thing, and then you select this thing that replaces it. It's like, it should just be a choice node. Like Ellie did this so good.
Colossus Smash and Warbreaker is the number
Colossus
one
Smash and
example here.
Warbreaker. That needs to be a choice node.
Yep.
You need to select either. But then I guess if that's a choice node, why do you take Colossus Smash? Right.
Right. They'd have to do something to differentiate it, like maybe
yeah,
give it
there
a
has to
longer
be something
duration.
different.
Yeah.
So like, I kind of get it in that aspect. It's kind of harder with that. Like, right, Fire Ellie versus Storm Ellie is completely different. There's nothing like, they're completely different. So I think that's okay. But
I do also hate that arms still has sharpened blades and blunt instruments as a choice node.
yeah, that's just bad. That just needs to go.
It runs into the same thing as single-minded fury versus Titan's grip, where if one is going to be tuned better, and then you're going to get the other one to drop, and
Wait. Look at it. Look at sharpened blades and
the problem here is actually that, like, there's no tuning that can make this design better than blunt
no,
instruments
it's
right now.
fixed. And this tooltip, at least, this is perfect. It works. Look at the tooltip. Sharpened blades. It says nothing about using axe or sword. Blunt instrument says nothing about using mace or polearm.
Oh shit! Well, they need to change the names then, because that's confusing.
That real? I'm gonna get on beta.
Yeah,
and
I'm
confirm that.
curious if this is real. Before, this tooltip 100% said, when you're using axe or sword. So like, the fact that the tooltip has changed,
That's actually
Like,
huge. Well, in that
that's
case, bravo,
That's
Blizz.
6. That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Arms is like, with that change, arms is great because like the idea behind sharpened blades and blunt instruments is so good.
Yeah.
Like so good.
Yeah. Do you want to be execute
you can
focused? Do you want to be
select-
Colossus Smash?
Yeah, those are two very like awesome. Like that's a great choice node for playstyle like
Are
preference.
there enough points to take
That's awesome. Yeah.
sharpened blades and Juggernaut?
Where's Juggernaut at?
Bottom
Oh,
right.
Bottom right.
I can't stand Juggernaut having so many stacks to reach.
Yeah, I
Yes,
don't think
you
you can
can.
play bleed build at all. You can't play bleed build doing that. But
Right. So,
but I mean, when you take sharpened blades, you don't really care about bleed build anyway, because
Yep.
like you don't care about bleed build in single target. And then you wouldn't care about Juggernaut in single target either. So I think you have a very definite like you have a right side with a little bit of left, like burst AoE build. You have a left and middle like bleed consistent AoE build, and then you just have a all right side hard heavy execute build.
the one thing I don't like is that Juggernaut being able to like stack to 20 sounds like a great thing to build up to. In practice, as raid bosses go down faster, you're never going to get full benefit out of this talent. I really think they need to raise the percent and lower the stacks.
Agreed.
I could
Like
see
maybe
that, yeah.
like maybe 4%, 12 stacks, whatever they want to tune that to.
Yeah, because like
because it especially feels bad if there's some type of window that forces you off the boss for 12 seconds and your buff drops. Your entire damage window has just been completely torpedoed.
all right, and then on
You're at, like,
farm,
18 stacks.
But also, like on progression, if you have your arms warrior, like if you have somebody playing arms, you have them assigned to the execute window, so you're actually like you're always going to be playing around your arms warrior. Like,
on progression, yeah, but like on to Cheat's point, like on farm, like how often do you even get to execute 20 times? Like,
yeah,
because the boss. So I mean, but again, like that could be some fun design because then you can just like spec out of it and you could like play something else.
Yeah,
Essentially,
I'm looking at beta real quick, by the way, about blunt instruments and sharpened blades, and it looks like we are in the clear. There is no weapon requirement listed on them.
Pog.
Yeah,
Let's go, Blizz.
change the names now.
Yeah.
Like I think the names are cool. Like I think sharpened blades still works. Like I still think that that's okay,
I
just
think
because
they
of,
both
like,
need new names, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do
well, I mean,
too.
just, like if you look at the execute, like it's always been a sharp ass like execute like icon, right? Like I think that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. I think thematically sharpened blades is okay.
Yeah, but you could call it like sever the head and like fucking pound the flesh or something. I don't like,
Yeah.
Yeah, pound that flesh. Right?
pound that
Ooh,
flesh.
might have to be careful with that one.
But like, yeah, sever the
There's
head for
already an
execute.
ability called Pound of Flesh, so
Yeah.
it's not that far off.
So yeah, I know you're not a big arms guy. So we don't really have to get too far into your thoughts, but overall, we've done this with the other two specs we reviewed. So like, how do you feel about Warriors and Raid in Mythic Plus, the general state of Warriors?
I like the amount of choice that's being brought with the way talents are spread out. With a few notable exceptions like juxtaposed stat bonuses with the 2-pointers.
Having to take Whirlwind to get down.
There's a few new things they want to try to get people to try, like Thunderous Roar and anything bleed related. The big focus on that for all 3 specs, which has interesting potential. If you look at the left side of arms under Skull Splitter, there's a talent called Fracture, which brings a really interesting niche single target burst to arms that I've never seen before. But basically, you could apply all your bleeds and then immediately consume them for instant damage right then and there.
Yeah, I was about to say, is that what it does? Because it needs to say that. It needs to say consumes them instantly rather than they all expire.
I would really
instantly.
hope that's what it does, because otherwise, why would you ever take that?
Yeah, because then
why would you take it, right?
you're just removing all your damage.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Like, yeah, you can use this ability, but it sucks now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, like stuff like that where they're still trying to experiment, but instead of just only relying on old stuff, I think as it'll make things interesting. You know, what is all this stuff on the bottom left actually? Battle Lord, we know what that is. Fatality. Huh.
Oh,
Plays into
Yeah,
execute.
That's interesting, actually, because basically, the more mortal strikes you get in while the mob is above execute range, you now have this payoff at the end where you can proc this damage based on how many stacks you got.
Approximately 8 procs per minute is what it has listed in the tooltip here.
Yeah, so like you would have this very front-loaded execute at the start of your execute phase that just boom, huge clap.
Right.
That is interesting. I don't know if it'll tune correctly out the gate, but that's definitely new. And sort of goes along the line with what Fracture does as well, or should do.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have like this like left side burst bleed type build.
Exactly. And it plays into the arms feeling of having strong burst windows.
Yeah.
So like that was the entire reason I played arms on Sludge Fist and Nathria.
Right.
Until Fury got the adjustments was because I needed the burst window and it lined up perfectly.
Yeah, every pillar. So yeah, so obviously it seems like Fear or Warrior in general, all three specs seem to be, tuning aside, you know, obviously, seem to be in actually a really good spot. It seems like whoever's working on this tree is someone who clearly plays Warrior, hopefully, and at least it seems that way.
I love the point above Bladestorm too. Like I think this is a way to treat the stat nodes. Like this is a fantastic way to treat a stat node. You get versatility and
utility.
And the cooldown of Die by the Sword. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love how easy this build can set up for like whatever it wants to play into.
Did you catch the self-healing that they added for Die by the Sword?
Yeah.
There's a point you can take below Die by the Sword where every time you parry, you heal for 10%.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. But that only works for like solo content or if you do like taunt Die by the Sword stuff.
You can intervene your tank.
But also being healed for 50% of the damage of your deep wounds. Again, like if your other bleeds are attached to this is insane. But even deep wounds itself with like a deep wounds bleed build, because you still get a lot of extra deep wounds value. That's still more self-healing than arms ever has really had before. Which is pretty good.
Yeah, they go from being one of probably the squishiest classes to being like super
Not even
tanky.
Squishiest necessarily, but like healer dependent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Non-self-sustainable. And I think also Stormwall as like a niche use, like having that as a niche, like, oh, I'm gonna taunt Die by the Sword on this fight, or you know, I'm doing open world content, like that is an awesome point there.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, even though I said, oh, it's not always useful, that's okay. It's okay for it not to always be useful, but the fact that it's there is awesome. But dude, I love how much freedom you have for this build. Like, you could either take all of the capstones in the middle and then still, like, you can take all of that in the middle, you can take one of them and then go down to like Skull Banner. Like, you just have so much freedom to like fill out the build that you're trying to play around and then just go
get some extra
cherry pick for like, you have like 6 points to do it too.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think
this is a really good tree.
I think overall, if I had to sum up Warrior direction, it would probably be first I would call back to the what is it? What patch were we in? The patch 9.2 dev cycle, where we went PTR build after PTR build with almost no Warrior changes or hotfixes during live. And I think that was really a testament to the state that the class was in, because they had, whoever's designing it had put them in such a good scenario. And now with Dragonflight, they're not tearing any of that down. They're building it up, improving stuff that felt bad, offering you variation, and especially with arms, maybe they're going to get to a point where it's something that other people like to explore if it feels a little faster than it did in the past
Yeah.
without
Well,
being
and also
overwhelmingly fast.
on that note, and like kudos to Blizzard just across the board for most, if not all of the specs that we've seen so far. Like the amount of Shadowlands legendaries that they're baking in almost all tier sets. They're currently they're baking in, and like it really goes to show like just the cadence of finishing an expansion, finally getting specs into like a really good playstyle area where they feel good to play, and then tearing it all down, and then like, oh well, this spec feels like ass, this spec feels like ass, like none of these feel good anymore. But holding on to all of that going in and not starting from ground zero again, and just having this good base, I think is awesome.
Well,
Yeah, and there was a lot of
They're
noise
doing a
about,
really good job so far with that.
and there was a lot of noise before Dragonflight was announced about, how much is Blizzard listening to feedback? I think even though we're not getting a lot of acknowledgement all the time before we really got these details, the talent trees are a testament that the class
Yeah.
designers at least are looking at this and listening to people.
Especially like the priest one coming out today, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's way better than it was, and they didn't say shit about it. They just said, "Hey, we'll have something for you soon." But it's been radio silent for priests for the whole alpha cycle so far.
I also don't think that
They're working on it.
I think it's
obviously.
a different era with dev feedback and content creators, and something that we haven't seen in the past, like with these Mythic Plus guys having a much bigger audience than they did 4 or 5 years ago, with how big like Max and Gingy have gotten. And
Yeah.
like you see the devs in these guys' chats when they're doing spec reviews. So they're getting like immediate feedback from these streams, and then they are able to just like, they're getting it from people that they can view as like a trusted source of opinion. Like it's not
Yeah.
some guy raging behind a keyboard. These are people who play your game at the highest level, giving you direct
And
feedback.
Also, big kudos to Max, man. Like the way he's attacking these trees in his reviews, like he's not attacking them from a world first rating point of view. He is, right? Like personally, he's giving that take, but he is thinking about, the casual side, the mid-level side, and he's bringing in other people of like, oh, bringing in Trill for Windwalker as like a raid in PvP. Like we never talk about PvP, but we have Trill available. He's going to talk about the PvP, part
Right.
of this, and like just bringing in all of these different views from all different sides and different gameplay loops. And obviously they're all high end, right? But Max specifically, just big props to him for just putting that aside and thinking of it at like a mid-level and even a low level.
Yeah. And like, I
And
know
giving that feedback.
I know we're big Max simps around here, but like, it's more than him too. Like I've watched a bunch of other creators put content out and just opinions on the class trees, whether they were the people who were involved in Max's streams or just they're doing it on their own. I think this iteration of feedback being given back to Blizzard is much more effective than it has been in the past, where they had like that community Discord, that like private Discord where they were giving feedback. I think it's just a different era of feedback in this iteration.
I specifically give credit to Max though, because like it's just
I just really love Max.
I just watched through like the Shaman one to hear their takes on it, and I love Growl. Like Growl is an amazing content creator, but holy fuck, that dude's like, he is so fucking based. Like he doesn't take any gameplay loop outside of his own into consideration, which is just a lot of the high end guys don't, and I don't really blame them. But I think Max is just doing a good job taking other gameplay styles into consideration.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot of differing opinions.
I don't think a lot of the high end guys do, because it's hard to. Like, you play at the high level, you only care about the high level. I mean, I'm kind of the same way too, right? Like I'm in that middle where it's like, I know what's best, but this is more fun, so I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
gonna play it anyway, right? Like,
Yeah,
and I'm
for
okay
sure.
with that. Whereas, like, they obviously in their own personal gameplay wouldn't, but I think Max is doing a good job just
Go
seeing
Max.
that.
We heart Max.
Yeah.
All right. We ran a little long, which I expected. So I will give you the floor, Cheat, for any final words you would like to say about Warrior, about beta, about life, any words of wisdom, anything you'd like to say.
Wow.
This is your
I mean,
hot this is your hot ones moment where you get
really, yeah, exactly. Honestly, the way that they are structuring these trees, not just with Warrior, but with what they're really trying to do with all the specs, I think lays a much better long-term groundwork for the game. And I think that, coupled with the feedback cycle we're seeing, both not just from content creators, but just the things they're picking up from general forums, and especially the alpha, now beta forums. My wall of skepticism for Blizzard development on WoW is starting to break down. I think that they really have the best interests of the game at heart again. They're starting to understand that people like to focus on multiple characters, or if they don't, they'll like to do a single character and log off for a bit. Like, the flexibility in allowing people to play what they want becoming a focus again,
And how they want.
absolutely huge for the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that a lot.
Sweet. Well, thank you both again. Cheat, thanks for being our special guest and educating me on Warrior, because the last time I played Warrior was Emerald Nightmare. So it's been a minute since I've really dug into the Warrior trees. So we will be back at some point, hopefully soon, because Hakkd and I wanted to react to the Max and Ion interview, and we didn't get a chance to last week. So we will probably do that maybe this weekend if he's got time.
That. Are you gonna?
Oh, I lost
Sorry,
it.
I muted myself.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not a call if you don't at least accidentally mute yourself.
Yeah.
Are you guys also gonna react to Max reacting to himself?
Oh, maybe. And then we can react to us reacting to Max reacting to himself.
Yeah, it's just like an endless inception.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can like send him the VOD and just see if
and then he can react to us reacting to him reacting.
Oh my God.
Reacting to him reacting to his
and
interview.
then Ian gets a hold of it, and then he does a reaction.
Well, and then it goes on YouTube, and then Asmongold reacts to all of it. Right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, there we go. The final form is taken when Asmon gets his hands on it.
Oh, shit.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you for joining me and having this fun chat about Warrior, and I will see everybody next time. Peace.
Peace.